Hey now, welcome back to Lone Star Mini Restoration. Today I removed the camshaft bearings out of my 1275 engine. So in the process of cleaning my engine block, getting it ready to go have the bores measured and possibly honed or maybe even reamed up to the next size, I realized that I still had some bearings on the block. 3 of those were the camshaft bearings. So in the process of figuring out how to remove them, I realized I needed a tool. My tool came in. It's what's in this blue case over here. I'll show you that real quick, and then let's take some bearings out. I have to say that I have an absolute wonderful wife. When I was figuring all this out, whether or not I should get the tool or not, she's like, all right, how many engines do you have? How many minis? How many engines? I was like, 4. She goes, you know, it's worth buying the tool. You know, just get the tool. So I was like, yeah. So here's the tool. Comes with this longer shaft when you have to reach through the entire engine block. A shorter one. This is extra rubber. I assume if you use it a lot, the rubber on the expansion joints wear out. This is a specific washer, cone, and then you have 5 different sizes for the different bearings. Now I have already determined that these 4 are no good on my 1275 engine. The only one I'm going to use is this one, and then of course the end of this for the small bearing. There are 3 camshaft bearings on the engine. This one closer to the water pump and the center one inside here are the same size. And then you've got the smaller bearing over here. Let me come around there. You have the smaller bearing right here where the oil pump is. So what I'm going to be using, I'm going to be using this smaller guy, the smaller diameter, these 2 rods, and for removing, I may or may not be using the cone. Yeah, I will be, but these 2, the cone and the smaller one. So let me show you how it's done. Okay, the way this works, this rod, it's got basically a nut on this side. This is too slippery for me to do this by hand, but if I hold this side with a wrench and then twist this piece in here is made of 4, if the camera can pick it up, you can see the seams in there. It's made of 4 pieces. And as this rod spins into this rod, it expands outward. And this reason it's coated in rubber is this rubber will grab the bearing. And then the bearing lip goes against this, and basically you hammer it out. Now, for the small bearing in the 1275 or 998 block, I'm just going to use this with no expanding adapter. This is the smallest expanding adapter that comes in the kit. And just so you see, it also has, it's made of 4 pieces so that it can expand. I'll pull one of the pieces out. There you go. So there's one of the pieces, and there's 4 of them, and they all go in together. And this slides over this one like that. I won't push it on because I'm not going to use it right now. But if you push that on, and when you expand the inner one, it expands the outer one, and it grabs the bearing. The rubber grabs the bearing, and then the lip of the bearing goes against this, and you knock it out. So, and I'll do this one, but first I'm going to remove the small bearing with just the rod without the expanding adapter. All right, one thing I need to mention before I start hitting this out is this unit comes assembled with this larger washer, spacer, whatever you want to call this guy. And when you're removing the bearings, you don't want this on there because this has to go all the way through the opening with the bearings. So you need to take this bad boy off. Well, I do for my small bearing. As for the rod itself, I mean, I've screwed the lower one in with the expander. I've screwed it into the longer end. This is the end that I use my dead stop hammer on to knock it out. Now, obviously, when you're removing a bearing on the end of the block, you don't need it this long. You kind of have to hold it there. You hold it as straight as you can and knock it out. But when you start getting to the center bearings, On a 1275, it's no big deal. But if you have a larger engine, yeah, I could see that you would need the length of the rod. All right, what you can't see in the camera right now is that I'm twisting it, and it is expanding. All right, so on this side, I've expanded it enough to grab the bearing, and on the opposite side, on this side, the bearing, I have it just up against the collar, so I should be able to knock that out now. And there you go, you can see it knocking the bearing out. And I'm just tapping it. I am not going crazy because I didn't want to mess up the block. I'm going to loosen the expander now. And now the bearing should just slide right off. And voila. All right. Okay, for the center bearing, I'm going to have to use the smallest expanding adapter they have. So what I'm going to do is, this is where I just slide these bad boys together. And the key tip here is that where the seams are on the expanding adapter, they need to match the expansion joints on the main shaft itself. That way when it expands, they expand together. It's also worth noting too that it's a sequence of things. This has to go through the hole the first time, and then you put on the expanding adapter. Otherwise it won't fit through the first bearing. So I don't know if this can see, but you can see right now as I'm putting it in, this rubber, it fits nicely through the bearing. There's a little bit of slop. It's not tight. The other comment is that now with a center bearing, you use this cone. Now what the cone does is it sits inside the bearing, the casting bearing hole. It helps to center the pole. All right, so same sequence. I am going to put the wrench on in place. Use the block to lock the wrench, and I will begin to twist it on this side to expand the expanding adapter and get the bearing just right with get the adapter perfect with the bearing. All right, so not a lot of force. It doesn't take a lot of force to pull that out. All right, so now back it out. I loosen. I retract the adapter so that the bearing will slide off. Voila. And pull that out. All right, so I have put the adapter back on. I've aligned up the seams, so now I will put it in. All right, so an observation here. The larger bearing that's close to the water pump has two oil holes. One there on the bottom you see, and then you can see that one up there. Of course, that one's all corroded and full of gunk. I'm sure that was not good. But so it has two oil galleries that lubricate the bearing. This guy in here, the center bearing, has one, and I can't see it, but I can feel it. Let's see. Right there where my finger is, there's an oil gallery there, but then the smaller bearing over here has no oil gallery whatsoever. So I have learned something about cam bearings and used a new tool, and I think it's fairly successful. I've looked at the block, everything looks beautiful, can't complain. Before I end this, a couple observations. As I've already pointed out, there's 3 bearings. There's 3 bearings here, and actually, now that I'm looking at them, they all look slightly different. These 2 might be the same size, but boy, they almost look like a hair difference. But the smallest bearing, there is a little notch. There's a little notch in the edge of the bearing, but other than that, there's no hole. There's no hole in that bearing to align with the hole in the block. That's that one. The center bearing, as you can see there, has one hole in it, and it also has a little notch. I'm not sure what that notch is for. Maybe if somebody knows, they can tell me. And then the larger bearing has 2 holes. There's one there, and then one there is elongated. That's a bit interesting, why it's elongated. I mean, I'm sure we want to align this hole up perfectly, and if you do that, then I'm not sure why that. Maybe it just helps more oil to go through or spread out. I'm not sure. But it also has a larger notch in it, so I'm not sure what that is. But 3 bearings, they are now out, and I consider this a wrap. All right, so thank you. Until next time, thank you for joining in. I consider this another successful job on my mini engine. All right, bye just now.